and introduce Cynthia. I think many of you know Cynthia Powell. She's currently the executive director for CalFlora, and she's been in that position since 2016. And prior to that, well, she has an MS in Geographical Information Sciences. And prior to 2016, she spent 3 years as CalFlora's GIS program manager. She has extensive experience in dealing with CalFlora and with mapping and GIS issues. This evening, she's going to tell us about new CalFlora tools for your native plant ventures and adventures. So welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you. So
And
I'll
yes,
share my screen. Oh, go ahead.
Just real quick, we will be posting this recording after the fact to our YouTube site. So anybody who wants to view it again or who can't make this presentation, they can view it on our website. Okay, Cynthia, I'm going to mute myself. And the way we run these meetings is Cynthia will do her program from beginning to end. And then if you have questions during the presentation, you can put them in chat, or you can save them at the end and raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask the question in person at the end. So
thanks, Snowdy. And if you have a really burning question that needs to be answered before you understand the concept, go ahead and type it in the chat, and Snowdy will, or someone will hopefully call attention to it. This gorgeous photo is one of Geoff Burligh's photos, and your chapter and Steve were responsible for making sure that Burligh's photos are available to the public and continue into posterity through CalFlora. And I'm going to talk more about that, but here's this gorgeous Calicortus by him. So the outline for tonight is CalFlora basics, the Burliegh legacy, how to ID plants you see using CalFlora, how to obscure any rare plant observations, the planting guide, so that's for gardens and restoration sites, surveys and checklists, iNaturalist, and then your questions. Here's the CalFlora team, and as Snowdy mentioned, I'm the executive director and my MS is in GIS. So I'm not a botanist. I'm really good with maps and data science. And that's how I ended up as the director of a database that is about plants. We are a 501c3 nonprofit providing information on wild California plants for conservation, education, and appreciation. The database itself contains over 8,500 native and introduced plant species. That's all plant species in the state. Over 3.5 million plant location observations in the form of points, lines, and polygons. For instance, why would you ever use a polygon for a plant observation? If you had several acres of an invasive plant or even just a native plant, and instead of, if it's a grass, you don't, there's a blade of grass here and there's a blade of grass 2 feet away and there's a blade of grass right next to it. You can just say in this area, we have a % cover or a plant count of X. And that's what a polygon is good for. And then I want to emphasize the dozens of data sources. One of those data sources is your chapter. And your chapter, in part, there's Geoff Burligh's photos, and then in part, observations coming from your chapter members into the database. Also, we receive a data feed from iNaturalist. Also, we receive a data feed from the Consortium of Herbaria, which is specimens. Also from EDD Maps. So we have all of these sources coming in and being aggregated by CalFlora and served to the public. And so it's not just CalFlora observations, they're being served by CalFlora and coming from a lot of different places. As you know, the plant names change, and I'm going to talk more about this in more depth, but whether you're searching for a mimulus or a diplicus, you'll find the name in CalFlora, and we crosswalk. That's the verb we use. We crosswalk the new name to the old name to the old name all together, so you'll find the plant that you're looking for. And you can see the names and how they've changed over time. Over 300,000 plant photos, and the best of those we use as reference photos. So every observation does not need to have a photo. You can have a plant observation in CalFlora without a photo. If you do have a photo, it doesn't need to be a particularly good photo, but if it is a particularly good photo like Burligh's, then we have a team of volunteers who culls these photos that are constantly being uploaded and pulls out the best ones to serve as reference photos. If you'd like to be part of that team, we would welcome you, and you can contact me. I'll add you to that team. And then we have about 80,000 e-visitors each month, 2,600 a day, and about 4,000 active data contributors across the state. And that, by that number, is humans, so not counting the iNat, and so iNat would count as one data source, and by 4,000 it's like not, anyways, humans. The CalFlora database contains all 8,500 native and introduced species, all wild plant species in the state. And I emphasized a minute ago about how we receive many data feeds from other data sources, including CCH, which stands for California Consortium of Herbaria. Those are the pressed specimens. They date back to 1800 even, so long ago. And we also have some filtered iNaturalist data. iNaturalist data is great, except when it's not. And we try and filter out as much of the problematic data as we can. It's a computer algorithm, so we can't get everything, and it's millions of observations, so we can't touch them all. But people like you searching through CalFlora, if you see something that doesn't look right, you can comment on it, you can let us know, you can do both, and that gives a flag. So if you comment on a record, there's a flag, and if the observer doesn't change the ID, then it is hidden from CalFlora default searches. Louise appreciates the photos of the entire plant so that you can see what it looks like in its situation. And I've heard that before, you know, people like the first reference photos, for instance, should be the whole plant. And after that, you can go and zoom in on, you know, the petals or the stamen, like whatever you need for diagnostic identification. But that first reference photo, a lot of people do want it to be the whole plant. And Louise, if you would like to be, I would love it if you wanted to be a reference photo editor, join our team. So please let me know, send me an email if that's something that it's as much or as little time as you want to put into it. You can choose the taxa that you're interested in. It actually is a great learning experience too, because you learn more about the species that you're interested in. The data sets in CalFlora, it's a long list, and this is just some of them. It's hundreds, maybe thousands, depending on how you're counting. And I wanted to highlight here your chapter with the Burliegh photos, the Geoff Burliegh photos, being an important source of data. So he kept a database with locations and with a unique ID to the photos, so that after his death, we were able to, with your chapter's help and Steve's help, and actually Patrick's help, he's on the call too, pair the location with the photo, because every photo added to CalFlora, it's not just in CalPhotos, you can add a photo and just write a location description if you want to, and that's enough. In CalFlora, we use the location for all of our algorithms. So there's no photos without locations. And luckily Burliegh had kept this database and had the unique IDs going to the photos. And that way we were able to upload his photos into CalFlora, and they're really useful. Without the locations, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So if they were just a bunch of pretty plant pictures somewhere in California, you can put those on CalPhotos, you can put them in Flickr, but we can't take them into CalFlora. And so it was a big effort and worth it, I think. You can look through this list: iNaturalist Research Grade, Invasive Spartina Project, Urban Ranch Conservancy, USDA, USGS, Yosemite, WIMS, lots and lots of data sources, all pulled together, aggregated into this database. As important as what we are, I realized even the people who I thought knew CalFlora backwards and forwards actually didn't, because they thought we were part of CalPhotos. CalPhotos is part of UC, and we're not part of UC. The Cal really is problematic, I think, because Cal, people think, oh, UC. We're also not part of CalIPSI, the California Invasive Plant Council. They're a separate nonprofit. You all probably know this because you are part of CNPS, but CNPS is a separate nonprofit from CalFlora. And we're also not part of CalScape. CalScape is part of CNPS. So the Cal is confusing, but we are our own separate nonprofit since 2000. And I just try and emphasize that because people don't, even people who know CalFlora really well, don't all know that. So where is our funding from? About a third is fee-for-service work. About a third is from donations, private and groups like CNPS chapters like your own. Thank you for supporting CalFlora. And about a third is Weed Manager. So as the executive director, it's important for me to kind of track this and know where the funding sources are and be able to pay our developers and our staff. And Weed Manager is an invasive plant software that we rolled out in 2014, and agencies and organizations tracking treatment of invasive plants pay a subscription to use Weed Manager in order to create reports showing how many acres they treated with what chemical, what percent, how many hours it took, was it staff, was it, what labor, etc. And that is a whole separate presentation. My Weed Manager one is different. So it's not what we're talking about tonight, but that is a third of our funding. With our Google statistics, we can see what people are doing on the CalFlora website, and most of what people are doing are landing on these popular taxon report pages. Every species, there's one taxon report page for each wild plant species in California. How many is that? Have you been paying attention? Type it in the chat if you know how many wild plant species there are in California. I've mentioned it a few times. And that'll equate to how many taxon report pages there are. Yay, Charles, 8,500. Somebody's paying attention. There's the bloom period. We have the scientific name, the author or authors, common name or common names, links to the pests and pathogens or from Cal invasives. Oh, I should have listed that as something else, another Cal. Relevant links, the plant range. So where can this huckleberry grow in the state in addition to where it already is? Look closely at these observations. Who saw the huckleberry here? What year? Are there photos? Plant characteristics, etc. Family, genus, and photos. I mentioned this crosswalking that we do when there's a new plant name, and I know it's really challenging. Cynoglossum grande has a new name now. I think it's Adelina. And it's hard for me too. Like it's just keeping track of this. You can't do it in your own head all the time. So even if you're looking up Mimulus cutatus, you will find Erythranthe microphylla. And that's one of the beauties of CalFlora. We do not change. So for instance, if Geoff Burliegh, he does have some photos of monkey flowers that are Mimulus. We don't change his original ID. We leave it, and then it crosswalks to the new Diplicus or Erythranthe that it is. We also offer nursery and seed sources for all the native plants in the database. So if there's something you'd like to grow or buy a seed for or buy a start for, you can click on it, and I'm going to do a lot of these things live in the database after my presentation. For instance, this verbena, if you wanted to buy it, you could look and see, okay, Santa Barbara, is that the closest one to me? And then, you know, contact them, see if they, well, you guys are having a plant sale now too. We do actually have some, oh, we had the Santa Clara Valley Nursery, the CNPS Santa Clara Valley Nursery. If your chapter sends us a list of what you're selling, we can include it in this for the period of time that you have your plant sale also. Okay, so that's CalFlora Basics. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Burliegh Legacy. And Louise pasted a link into the chat to your chapter's website that has more information about the Burliegh Legacy. This is just a snapshot of the locations of some of Burleigh's observation locations. The purple dots show that. And so he was mostly down in the LA-ish area, but you know, he got around, got up north sometimes too. And these photos, for instance, here's one. Oh yeah, here we have a diplicus. So this is a snapshot, some pieces of this taxon page for this diplicus. And what I should have done, we can look at this in a minute when we go to the CalFlora website, is listed also what this diplicus used to be called, because it wasn't always Diplicus calicinus, maybe is how you say that. So his photos appear as reference photos, which is what I'm hoping Louise and some of you will be interested in doing, and is pulling them in Geoff's photos and other people's photos when they're particularly good ones, which his often are, into the CalFlora database so that people can use them to help know what these plants look like, what this monkey flower looks like, this rockbush monkey flower. And then the blue dots again show the distribution of the species in the state. And it's not static. So sometimes people will use a screenshot of the map with the blue dots to show the distribution of a species in their presentation. That's great. If it's something that's a PDF and going to be, you know, used for many years, and it goes out of date quickly because someone else is going to see it and log it into the database, or we get it as from one of our data sources, and more blue dots will appear. So, you know, it's not static. It's always changing. And also the photos, because we have this team of volunteers changing the photos. If something better comes in that's better for identification, diagnostic purposes, then those get switched out regularly also, which is also good for Google because Google likes it when pages are updated regularly. Okay, how to ID the plants you see? The best way to do this is actually for us to go onto the CalFlora website. So I'm going to do that. Okay, do you see calflora.org in my browser? Or do you still see something other than my browser? Yes, okay, thanks, Colette.
Yes.
You see it? Okay. And it's a really good question. Charles asked in the chat about those blue dots. Do they disappear if the plant if the plant disappears, from an area, do the blue dots also disappear? Let's just look at, okay, so here's so for instance, this is the California white oak or a valley oak, Quercus lobata. Here's the distribution. If an area is developed, maybe, you know, here in the valley in Fresno County, and they cut down that tree, what happens to the blue dot? In terms of a historical record showing where plants used to be, we wouldn't get rid of the record showing that it used to be there, it used to grow there, the habitat was suitable for the species then. And what you can do is create a history stack showing change over time. So if you search for the area and you don't find it, then you can say negative data, 0 plants found, search for not found, and create that history stack showing that it used to be there and now it's not. And also in terms of climate change, that's a really valuable tool to show if, you know, where are things moving over time and how is the distribution changing over time. Okay, so let's see. Oh, whoops, I'm supposed to go back. Oops. So here we are. Let's go back to the home page again. Now, if you want to, there's a lot of ways to ID the plants you see when you're out hiking or out in the wild somewhere. And one way to do it is to go to search for plants. And let's say that you were in LA County and you saw what you're pretty sure is a monkey flower, but you're not totally sure. And you were, let's say, above how many meters? Not very high. LA County, how high does LA County even get in meters? You could even say we were below 500 meters. It's probably easier. Okay, so monkey flower. Search. So 6 matching records. So there are 6 species that have monkey flower in the common name that grow below 500 meters that are in the county of Los Angeles. Yeah, and here's the common name. And here they are. So that's one way that can help you ID plants. Another way that I use a lot is we have a group. There's a lot of different CalFlora groups for special interest groups. And there's one called Plant ID Help Group. And I will sometimes, like here, I'm signed in as me. And so that means that everything is customized to me, like my observations, my contributor profile, my groups, my comments, or comments I've made or comments people have made on my records, my preferences, where do I want the map to zoom into, my searches. You can also create email alerts, being alerted when Pat McMabel adds an observation to the database, or when anything that's rare enters LA County. Plant lists, you can create a plant list for your plant cell, a plant list to see your species of interest, and then shapes, like shape files and KMLs and shapes that are helpful to me for my queries. So there's a group called Plant ID Help Group, and you can add your observation to this group. Let's see, I'm already a member of the group, and if you weren't, you can just join it. And here are some recent observations added to the database. Let's fold up the map. So unknown, and then, oh, this is one of mine. I'm pretty sure this is a drum and sink foil, but I'm not positive. I was in Lawson when I found this. So I was just hoping that someone would confirm or deny that's what it is. Gail doesn't know what this is. And let's look at this in more detail. A long trail near the Alabama Hills Scenic Area parking and picnicking station on a rocky slope above Lone Oak Creek. We could see what somebody wrote here. Definitely Malvaceae. Okay, who is this? Oh, Andrea Williams. Okay, so she's, I happen to know her. She's very knowledgeable. She works for actually CNPS in Sacramento. I was asking, is the date right? So odd time of year to find it. So anyways, that's how you can, another way that you can ID plants that you see is to add them to this group called Plant ID Help Group in CalFlora, and use the homepage with your county and elevation and kind of general location. Another way to do it, I'll just show you, there's a million ways. I'm not going to be able to go over all of them, but another way you can do it is go to what grows here. And let's go to, this is layers. You can turn on protected areas to go to a specific protected area, then they all turn pastel, like Los Padres National Forest. But let's go to your CNPS chapter. So turn on CNPS chapters, zoom in. Sorry. All right, so if you were hiking in the Santa Monica Mountains, for instance, let's draw a polygon. Let's say you were just north of Malibu, around there. Stop drawing. So in that selected area, any plant name, it was blooming in October. So let's just see what blooms in October in that area where we were hiking. Oh, that's a lot. 296 plants bloom in October in this tiny, what I thought was a tiny polygon. Wow. Well, then you could look through these, or you could make your polygon smaller. You could say, I know that it was a native, or I know that it was non-native, and then limit the results that way. So it's another way to ID plants that you see. Oh, that cut it almost in half. While you're out and about. Okay. 350 meters elevation, Griffith Observatory. Okay. So let's go back to from current slide. Swap. All right, so any questions? Well, I guess we'll do questions at the end. I showed you how to do that. Now let's talk about obscuring rare plant locations, which is really important if you want people to know in this general, maybe quad, USGS quad, there is a rare plant, but I don't want it to be poached. I don't want it to be dug up. I don't want it to be clipped. So I'm just going to obscure the location, and that way it's safe. But the information can still feed CalFlora algorithms about where it is, so that we know what the requirements are in terms of soil tolerances and climate tolerances. So here's a legend, the CalFlora legend: simple points purple, obscured points, or obscured points are that blue square, lines, polygons, pink. So anything that is a blue square is somewhere in this kind of shade. You can see the area in the background is shaded a little bit. It's somewhere in there, but we don't know exactly where. And if you click on the point, you can learn more about what the species is. It a Dudleya? What exactly is it that we're trying to protect here? But you won't know where in the shaded area it is. Surveys and checklists. I'm going to talk about your chapter survey and checklists in a minute. Quads, specimens, those are coming from CCH. Potential habitat. Zero plants. I mentioned that. I think Charles had a question about if something disappears from an area, that's when you can log 0 plants. And questionable. Questionable is if somebody's commented on it and it's kind of in this purgatory of, is it a legit observation or not? Okay, so then I clicked on this obscured observation. Justin Felder has a sedum obscured from in January, just so that nobody will know exactly where it is. Okay, any questions on obscuring before I go into the planting guide?
I have a question, and I'm
Yes.
not supposed to be interrupting, but
That's okay.
The thing of it is what about, like, CNPS does these rare plant treasure hunts?
Mm-hmm.
So, and often they're out looking for rare plants that haven't been seen since like 1938 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So if you obscure the location, then how do you know that you're going to go and find that again?
Right. That's a great question. If you want other people to know where it is, but just not the general public, you can put it into a CNPS group, like a rare plant treasure hunt group. And that way the people in the group can see the true location, but outside the group, then they can't see it. And I think Amy Patton has a CalFlora group for the rare plant treasure hunts. Alternatively, they can see that it's somewhere close by to where they're looking, and you can contact the observer and just say, I'm with CNPS, I'm not going to hurt this plant. Can you, if you're comfortable, would you please share the real lat long with me? Does that answer your question, Snowdy?
Yes.
Okay. Pat McMabel, you raise your hand.
Yeah, so in terms of obscuring, so my job has me working sometimes in private areas, and would that be an instance where if I observe something, I could or should obscure
Yeah,
it?
that's a great question. People working on private property, even if it's a weed, you know, like arundo, they'll still obscure it just because it's private property and they're not, you know, they're being paid through work, like you were just saying, and maybe the property owner wouldn't be comfortable with that information being shared. So yeah, some groups even just obscure everything, which is probably overkill, but if that's what you feel you need to do, then that's fine. You can also have a group and keep it private, so only the people in your group will see it. That doesn't help the broader CalFlora public know about distribution and plant range and stuff like that. But if that's what you feel you need to do to, you know, satisfy your boss or the landowner, then that's also an option. Okay, any other questions? All right, so the planting guide. Here's where you get to it. We're going to go back to Chrome. Okay, so here we are from the CalFlora homepage, calflora.org. And on the left are all these links. And the planting guide is for restoration sites or gardens where you want to know what native, obviously native, not invasive or non-native plants would grow well at a specific location. So what is an intersection or an address where someone on this call is either planting their own garden or working on restoration? I guess we could also look up Griffith Observatory. If nobody has an address, I could start with that. Griffith. Oh, there we go. Sylmar. Sylmar. Okay. Sylmar Road Street. Oh, it found it. Wow.
I think that's a Sylmar. Sylmar's a city, but I was just inventorying.
Oh, California. Okay.
Let me check something.
Oh, there it is. Okay, found it. So Sylmar. Okay, so should we say North Sylmar, Louise, or just downtown? Sure. Okay, wherever. So somewhere. Let's go near this. Well, I don't know this area. You guys know this area much better than I do. Saddle Tree Open Space. So let's say you had a garden or restoration site just south of there, Los Angeles County. We're gonna say low water, not right. It does not look riparian, not riparian. Shade, I'm guessing it's probably not that shady. More criteria. Check for wild plants. Here, let me just make this a little, you can see this better. Okay, now you can probably see this better. Check for wild plants. And these are your criteria. You can tighten the constraints if the results are too many and overwhelming. 210 is kind of a lot. So let's tighten our constraints. We only want our results to include wild plants that grow in the same county and within 10 miles and in the same ecoregion. And yes, we do want to use soil factors. Yes, we want to admit plants at the edge of their tolerances. We only want to use plants that we know or that the algorithm specs will really grow well there. And yes, that are easy to establish, please. So we should get less than 210, hopefully less than 100 with our new Titan constraints. And then yeah, 98. Wow, good guess. Let's not group by life form and let's fold up the map. So some attract pollinators. That's what this butterfly means. And these 98 species grow well in Sylmar, or just north of Sylmar, downtown. And if something is surprising to you and you think that's crazy, why would golden stars grow well there? Then let's have a look. You can go to the taxon report page, which we've seen before, showing the distribution of the species. You can go to the location suitability, which shows you why it showed up there. Just north, Louise's location, Sylmar, just north of Sylmar, is 490 meters. Gets 19 inches of precipitation, wet season is 5 months, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the location of the plant. This golden stars tolerates up to 2,480 meters. precipitation between 12 and 47 inches, etc. So that's why it showed up on our list. If we had selected, if we had unchecked that, then we would have gotten even more. But anyway, this one is not at the edge of its tolerance. And then you can also go to this CNPLX, is a mouthful, California Native Plant Link Exchange, which shows the nursery and seed sources for this species. Okay, so that is how the planting guide works. If you want to share these results, you can send it as an email. You can download the spreadsheet, and then you can look at what grows here in this ecoregion, just north of Sylmar. And Louise says she has a lot of these species. I should continue scrolling down this list. A lot of these species are growing in her garden. Wow, that's great, Louise. That's really great. Any questions about the planting guide and how you might use it to choose plants for your garden or for your restoration area? If Louise already has something growing in her garden with a specific scientific name, she, or common name, you could type in what you already have growing, and that will filter your results further by saying, okay, what grows well with this species? And the question about how frequently the CNPLX, the California Native Plant Link Exchange, is updated, it depends on the nursery. Some nurseries are really good about sending their stuff annually. And some, like this one, it looks like we haven't gotten since 2019, so that's out of date. This one, it looks like 2019. We try and include, if it's out of date, we try and note that. And you would, of course, contact them before you showed up hoping for specific plants. And if you wanted to, you could also download the spreadsheet and send it, to your nursery of choice. How many of these do you guys have? Or send as an email to your nursery of choice. If you forget how to use the planting guide, I have this, we created this video tutorial. It's a couple of minutes. And then we also have a help page. So every CalFlora application has help in text and help in video at the top, so that however you learn best, if you learn best by reading or if you learn best by seeing, I'm a visual learner, so the videos are the best for me. You get the help that you need. Okay, any other questions about the planting guide? You get there again from the home page, and down here the planting guide. All right, let's go back here. From current slide. Okay, so how does this planting guide? Oh, cool. Okay, that's great, Louise. How does this planting guide work? You put in a location and it gives you a list of the native plants that would grow well there. To find matching plants, the CalFlora algorithm matches plant tolerances with location values of the following factors. So there's 19 factors. Elevation is, of course, the first one. Climate, soil, maximum salinity, pH, minimum depth, maximum calcium carbonate equivalent, and ecoregion, and then also the county. So those are the factors that go into creating that list that we saw for Sylmar. And I mentioned Geoff Burligh's photos and the importance of the location associated with each photo. This doesn't work if you don't have wild plants growing with soil and climate factors. So every time you have a location for something growing in the wild, those soil and climate factors are pulled out. And that's how we know what the tolerances are for any species. Okay, now surveys and checklists. These green squares, I don't know if you remember the legend I showed earlier. One green square represents a survey in your chapter area. And it's pretty well covered, as we saw with the results for what grows here for that tiny part of the Santa Monica Mountains, having, 300 species or something. Really, you're doing your chapter, and the botanists in the area have done a good job. And surveys are when, instead of saying I saw this one plant in this one lat long, like this one location, saying I went to a bigger area, I did a hike along this trail, or I surveyed a plot and I saw this list of species at this one location. Here are the some selected names for the surveys in your chapter area, and you'll recognize these, and some of them are more descriptive than others. Maybe SR27 at PM3.3 slope 5 means something too, but I don't know what that means. And whoever added that to CalFlora must have said that, maybe in the location description they describe a little bit more what that is. So all of these surveys are really helpful, and I'm trying to in part say this is amazing, and in part say thank you, because a lot of you were involved, or at least some of you were involved, I'm sure, in some of these plant surveys. So thank you. And that is really helpful information. So in addition to points, lines, and polygons, we also have surveys. And surveys are kind of quicker. You just put a plant list in, you draw a polygon around the area, and they're not as useful in terms of if you wanted to go back and revisit the location and find a species that someone found in a survey, you just kind of know generally it was in this area. We don't know exactly where. It's kind of obscured in a different way, but they're really valuable. So thank you for making sure those are in CalFlora, and for adding more. You're starting to do, Snowdy just mentioned earlier, there was a hike last week or the week before, and you're doing another one in a week or two. So if you collect a plant list on these hikes and add the plant list to CalFlora, that is really useful. Okay, iNaturalist. It's possible to, we do get a data feed from iNaturalist, but it's heavily filtered and we don't pull everything. So if there's something that you want from iNaturalist that isn't in CalFlora yet, you can add it yourself. And I'm going to show you how to do that. And then we're going to go to your questions. Here we are on the homepage, calflora.org. And my CalFlora, my observations, add observations. There's a lot of different ways to add observations. You can add your photos here. You can use our phone app. It's called Observer Pro. It's on Android and iPhone. You can add one at a time from plant observation entry. You can add a survey or a checklist, which I just talked about. And here, add records from iNaturalist. So if any of you use iNaturalist, if you could type into the chat what your handle is. Or your username, or whatever you want to call it in iNaturalist. I just saw, nobody's typing anything. I just saw Susan Fawcett. I've been watching her in iNaturalist, and she has some, oh, here we go. Okay. Fake ID. All right, so here's Daniel Horowitz's. Stop with Susan Fawcett. Got some more. Fake underscore ID. And it could be that if your Creative Commons license isn't set so that CalFlora is allowed to pull your observations into the database. Oh, now we have Susan Fawcett. I decided to complete that one. All right, well, look at Susan Fawcett. She's an incredible botanist, and everything that she says is what it, like, I don't question her IDs at all. So if, oh, here we go. Here's fake ID too. Okay, great. So this is Daniel. So Daniel, I don't know you. Are you like, this is probably right? That looks about right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add this to CalFlora. Click on the ID. You can look at the detail, look at the location close up, or add it to CalFlora. So Daniel, I'm going to take this query and put it into the chat so that you can pull your own observations into CalFlora. And that means that Daniel's license, his Creative Commons license in iNaturalist is set so that we can pull his records. And these 67 are just records we didn't pull. You know, it could be that they looked questionable. It could be that we had enough already of that species in the area. Could be that they look cultivated. Like there's this whole thing. Don't take it personally. It's just a computer algorithm that didn't pull those in.
So question, some of my observations are not to species level.
Then they're not research grade and they won't show up here if they're not to species level. Well, it's only ever an option to pull anything into CalFlora that is at species level and is research grade. Okay, I thought I was doing Elizabeth. Betsy, that's interesting. Wonder why I did that. Well, if I wanted to, oh, it looks like it, oh yeah, it just did a much bigger query than what I was asking. So if I, Julia Bohemian, whoever that is, if this isocoma looked good to me, and I don't actually know the species, so I'm not going to do it for real, I could go here and say add to CalFlora, and then it would be in CalFlora. So you can do this by species, you can do this by username, you can do this by date, etc., and pull observations into the database. Why isn't it taking that? There we go. And then the guy. All right. So any questions about the iNaturalist pull? Well, the hand pull, I guess you would call this.
Yes, yeah, because I got lost.
Mhm.
I don't know where those add records from iNaturalist, where you started with that.
Okay, let's start over. Let's go to the home page. Go to add observations. Go to add records from iNaturalist.
Okay,
And
so
now,
how do the so you're searching iNaturalist, or those are the iNaturalist
yeah,
observations that are already in CalFlora?
no, you're adding them. So if you want, that's a good question. Let's do that. Let's look at the iNaturalist records that are already in CalFlora. That's a good way to go. So observation search, searching observations, other sources. Let's turn on iNaturalist. We're not going to get specimens in this query, and we're not going to get bryophytes in this query. Snowdy, what's a species that you're interested in?
Help.
Do you like Dudleas? Do you like sedums?
Epilobium. Let's
Epilobium.
epilobium.
Epilobium. Which, anyone in particular, or just all of them?
Pick one. Let's just
Okay.
see.
Let's see. Let's do Canum. I like this one. All right, and I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. Let's go further down since you guys are down here. All right, so in map area, Epilobium canum, including all sources, all CalFlora sources and iNaturalist. Oh, I guess we could just say in LA County. Okay, so there's 133. These are already in CalFlora, and the ones that start with IN are coming from iNaturalist.
Hmm.
And they also, I mean, I don't really love it that the iNaturalist handles are not necessarily a name. Like, I'm old-fashioned, call me old-fashioned, but I like when a person has a name instead of something that, I mean, maybe it relates to their name, but it makes it somehow anonymous, and I want to know who is this person and do they know what they're talking about. But anyway, that's not how iNaturalist works. And let's sort by ID. Oh, here's some Geoff Burliegh photos. Wow, look at that. That is gorgeous. Kier Morse. And then here we get into the IN. So these are the epilobium, the California fuchsia that came in from iNaturalist with our, probably most of them just through our regular data pull that we do with that computer algorithm. Some of them might have been pulled in by hand by somebody who's interested in epilobium. And when you're interested in a species and you want to know if there's more that CalFlora doesn't have yet, Snowdy, that's when you go to the add stuff from iNaturalist. And CalFlora does query the iNaturalist database, shows you everything that's not yet in CalFlora, and then you decide if you want to add it. It's just, iNaturalist is so much data, so many observations, and we just don't need all of them. But if you need them in CalFlora, then you can go ahead and add them. But we don't, we don't pull them all in automatically. It's already a lot of fuchsia. Wow. Okay, any other questions about iNaturalist or anything else? It's 8:03, so let's open it up to all questions CalFlora related.
Well, I can be very selfish because I've got a bunch of questions.
Good, I want to answer your questions.
So could I go first?
Yes,
And
you may.
a primary question that I have for our chapter, and actually for several chapters in LA County, is currently there's no flora, no published flora for Los Angeles County.
That's interesting. Well, we have one. Do you want to see it? Or is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay. And before I leave this observation search, if you wanted to download these Epilobium canum, you could go to tools. Here we have the help again, the video, data dictionary, what grows here. If you want to jump over to just a list of species that grow here, not the individual observations of the Epilobium. And download results, you choose your format, CSV, Excel, tab delimited, bar delimited, KML, JSON, JSON, shapefile, etc. And download it however you want. You do need to be signed in to download data. And actually, if you're not registered with CalFlora yet, you should register anyway, even if you never want to download data and never want to upload photos, because you will get amazing newsletters written by mostly me. And they're, I think, very informative and fun, and they have pretty plant photos. So I would suggest registering. And now let's go to Snowdy's question about the flora for the county. From the homepage, I think this is actually in news because it's kind of a recent thing. Here we go, county level floras. So this is below are floras for each county in California generated by What Grows Here application, utilizes all data sources available to CalFlora. So that's specimens, that's iNat, that's CalFlora observations, that's all of our data pools. Burliegh, everybody else. Plants are included in a flora if there are at least 3 observation records in the county. Native and non-native plants are included. And we chose this cutoff at 3. You can actually change that if you're not happy with that, if you want it to be higher or lower. But that was to kind of get, I don't know, in case there's some erratic thing that really doesn't grow there, to kind of trim those down. So. Going to take a minute. Okay, so according to the CalFlora data sources, there are 3,064 plants that grow in your county. And let's fold up the map because we know it's your county. And yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. That's gonna take a minute to load with all those photos for 3,000 plants. Maybe I can change my mind. Exit page. Okay, here we are again. Los Angeles County. Searching. We get the 3,000. Then we can just open up one of the life forms and look at some of the trees. And if you wanted, if you say, oh, I don't want to see acacia on my flora, please, then you can get rid of all, I don't want to see that. Let's only look at the native ones. Search again. So we're going to go from 3,000 to, what's your guess? Without the non-native, I'm going to guess 1,000. Yeah, that Carol pointed out that the 3,000 is natives and non-natives combined. Okay, so when it's just natives, it's 2,311. 2,311, that's a more reasonable number. And if you want, I'm kind of curious how many rare species do you guys think you have in your county? I'm gonna guess 300. 254. Wow, that was good. Here they are. Wow, look at that. The photos are still loading here, but so that's how you Snowdy, does that answer your question about the county flora?
Well,
If you
I
wanted
guess-
to
so
ahead.
you could then download that in some
Yeah,
format and
exactly.
and print it, I guess,
Right.
if somebody wanted a printed flora.
And if you wanted a printed flora with photos, you could do that. If you just wanted one with
Text.
simple, like no photos or just text to copy and paste it out of here, then you could just take this, copy and paste the whole thing into your Excel. And then you would have your flora with no photos, whatever format you want. You could also order it by family if you preferred.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Have to pursue that a little bit more.
Yeah, and it's very customizable. As you can see here, you could select low water tolerant, riparian, shade tolerant, commercially available. You could say, I only want to know the ones that bloom in November. You could say only vascular plants, serpentine affinity plants. Oh, do you have any serpentine affinity plants? Rare plants? That'd be interesting. 5. Oh, wow. Wow, those are gorgeous. You can say, I only want plants in a certain family. You can say, from my plant list, which ones grow in LA and are rare and have serpentine affinity, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of ways to customize it under criteria here if you want to. If 3,000 is too much, then customize it to what you want.
Okay. Betsy had a question. If coordinates are obscured in iNaturalist, is the observation pulled to CalFlora's database?
That is such a good question, Betsy. We have, so the answer currently, the short answer is no. And we are discussing with iNaturalist about, should we do this? Do we want to have the obscured stuff in CalFlora? And then do we obscure it again in CalFlora or just leave it the iNaturalist way? So short answer, not at this point, but that might change. Other questions?
Can you, it seems to me like CalScape and CalFlora, there are some parts of it that are competing. And I guess it's the what grows here aspect of CalFlora.
Well, I think so. The planting guide is really what I think is the most similar to CalScape, because CalScape is recommending what to plant in a garden, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so what grows here is for wild plants. It's what grows wild in an area. And in terms of cultivated gardens and what would you suggest in terms of the soil and the climate and elevation would grow well here? The planting guide is the most similar to CalScape. The differences between the planting guide and CalScape, and we actually have been meeting with CNPS staff quarterly about this because they're interested in changing CalScape. Right now, CalScape only uses CCH1, which is the older version of specimens, and they don't use iNaturalist, and they don't use CalFlora, and they don't use CCH2. And so they're the observation, it's just different. You'll get different results using the planting guide and using CalScape. And what's interesting to do is have a tab open with the planting guide, open up another tab and go to CalScape and just compare and contrast your results for the same location and see how they're different and maybe try and figure out why they're different. But they are trying to improve CalScape. CalScape also gives you a lot of helpful information about water and how to grow the plant and how high is it, how big is it going to grow to be, that kind of thing. That's not what CalFlora has in the planting guide. We give you a list of plants and then you go figure it out yourself. So there are some differences, Snowdy, but there is the planting guide and CalScape also have similarities. I wouldn't say it's really a competition. I would just say they're similar but different, and each good for, they overlap in what they're good for.
Okay. And another question is that occurred to me as you were going through, you showed all those plant surveys, like
Oh yeah.
Malibu Creek State Park and all of that. How do those plant surveys get into CalScape?
Into CalFlora.
I mean, CalFlora.
It's the Cal, I tell you, it's the Cal, like
yeah.
everything with Cal, it gets all
I'm so
mixed up.
sorry.
No, it's okay. I do it myself. Let's just look at those surveys. So survey search, I'm gonna go to, and because of my preferences, I live in Oakland, the CalFlora office is in Berkeley, so I have my map set here, but I'm gonna go to your chapter, which is this screenshot that I showed in my presentation. All right, so in that selected area, which is your chapter, I want all surveys. So here they are. And we could click on one to learn more about it. Do you know Catherine Pack?
No.
Oh, that's interesting. That's recent too. Let's see if there's more detail on that one. Can create
He's a volunteer at the Sepulveda Basin.
Okay.
Oh, cool. Okay, so survey checklist entry. Catherine Pack. Let's go to map. You can see this pink line. That's her polygon around this area. And the plant list. So this is a checklist for multiple visits. Elevation, and this was calculated by CalFlora, 213 meters. She chose the wetland habitat. This area is the area of her polygon. And the plant list is here. So 63 plants, and she included the plant count for some of that, like more than just one or more for some of them. And if, for instance, she had looked for prickly pear and not found it, she could say plant count 0, and that's negative data. And you can track, as long as you looked for it in the whole area, you can also track what you didn't find, which is negative data is a whole new, I'm not really going to talk too much about that, but it's very valuable and interesting. And surveys are a great way to track negative data. Ribes, wild rose. And if you or Catherine or anybody else wanted to create an illustrated plant list out of everything that she saw here, here's the illustrated plant list, and you could say no photos or group by family, like that. So let's go. Okay, don't get distracted, Cynthia. Now, Snowdy's question was, what was your question about these surveys, Snowdy? I'm sorry.
Well, who put that in?
Who added them? So in this case, Catherine did. Newton Wong works for Caltrans. Oh, that's what this means. That means something to
State route.
Caltrans. Yeah. Do you know
Yeah.
him? Yeah.
No, but I know State Route 27.
Okay. So these are all
Mhm.
Rico, actually, I met him at the CNPS conference. We had coffee together. That was really cool. He works for Caltrans with Newton, and they added this survey. So they added it themselves. All these people, Tom Chester, they added these surveys into CalFlora. And it's, if you wanted to add, if you go on a hike, the next chapter hike, and you want to keep track of the plants that you saw and add them to CalFlora, then you would go to, and I can, there's a video on this, I can walk you through it. New record, and then you say, okay, the plants we saw, you can either copy and paste into here and it'll check your spelling. So if you misspelled something, it'll flag it and say that's not right, and you have a chance to correct it. Or you can add plants one at a time. And then once you start typing, there's a drop down, which certainly helps with spelling. And you choose it, and then you say add that, add that, add that. So for all these surveys, the people copied and pasted a list into CalFlora, or did those names one at a time to create towing site. City of Malibu. Wow. What kind of plants do they have at the towing site? Biological resources assessment, towing site subdivision, final. Oh, did they want to make a towing site here? Do you guys know this area? I mean, yeah, here's what they found.
So anybody can go in, register yourself
Yeah.
on CalFlora,
Mm-hmm.
and then put in, it's community scientist can do it, or whatever. You have to actively, one at a time, put the plants in the list, right?
Well, or a whole list at the same, like you can copy and paste not one at a time, but the whole list in there, and then get your spelling corrected.
Okay.
And that's what under tools, this video, I copy and paste a whole list in there. And I included a spelling mistake just for the sake of demonstration. And then I
Okay.
correct it, and then it's accepted. And, this is creating surveys like this is really incredible for CalFlora. Like, it enhances the database quite a bit. And yeah, it's really valuable. So, uploading photos is a great thing to do. Adding surveys is a great thing to do. And it helps your chapter. It helps everybody researching. And I think what here, Michael Charters added some too. I think what you might have been hinting at is, what if the person doesn't really know what they're talking about, and they have a plant in their survey that just can't be right, or they have, and that, that happens. It's a database. People can add stuff. They don't always get it right. I don't always get things right. We all make mistakes. So that's why we have this system of, for instance, I'll just show you some comments. My CalFlora comments. Let's look at all comments made after October 1st of this year. And so this was David Pop's observation, and Melissa Harbert said, I don't think this is lobata, Viola lobata. I think it's Sheltonii. And until David Pop either defends his ID or agrees with her and changes it, let's see, I can go into here and look more closely. Oh, he changed it. Okay, so David Pop went in, changed it to lobata, and that's fine. So that'll show back up again in CalFlora default searches. If the person does not respond, then it gets thrown out of CalFlora default searches. So Diana will be able to see her observation, but nobody else will if she doesn't respond to what Andrea wrote. And that's how we catch, we can't possibly, as staff, and plus not being botanist myself, go and find all the mistakes. So that's why we have these really knowledgeable people combing the database and finding the mistakes, and then commenting on them, and then the observers are updating them. So that's really, really important. Okay, any other questions? If you do think of a question, a burning question, after we all look at the midterm results, which I know everybody's like, what's happening? What's happening? If you do have a question, contact CalFlora, and here's our email address. Please send us an email. A bunch of us receive emails at this address, including me, and include the link so that we can better help you. So if you're here and you're looking at the LA surveys and you have a question about all of them in general, this would be the link to include in your email. Or if you have a question about this Malibu Creek State Park, you could include just this link and say, I have a question about this one. But do keep in touch with us and send us all your questions and register at the top of the page so that you get our amazing newsletters. And thank you very much for having me. Yes, Snody?
Just real quick question on that survey thing. What generates that map? in the survey?
The person generates it, but in this case, the person, let's see, who is this? Resource Management Office. Oh, this is really old. Wow, that's interesting. When you're putting in your shape, if it's a crazy, this is a crazy shape, you can select it from, like, I'll just go to add observations, add a survey, new record, and zoom in on, let's say, this grasslands wildlife management area has a crazy shape. And if I were going to add a survey there, you can just select it. And then that way you don't have to go over, you don't have to try and draw a polygon like that. It just pulls it in. And if you only were in a part of it, then you could just draw your own polygon, uncheck that, start drawing and say, I was just over in this eastern part here. Stop drawing, and then that's your polygon area instead of this
Okay.
whole. Yeah.
All right.
I really want to thank your chapter for the Geoff Burliegh photos that are amazing and gorgeous and enhance the database quite a bit. And also just for your engagement, your interaction, your questions. Yeah, we really appreciate that. And thank you for your time tonight. It was a pleasure to present to your chapter.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was great. I've learned so much.
And Louise, I hope to hear from you about being a volunteer, and others of you about volunteer photo editing. That would be fabulous. Yes, and thank you all, and have a good night, and let's see what happened in those midterms.
Okay, take care. We'll be in
Take care.
touch.
Okay, sounds good,
Bye-bye.
Snody. Thank you so much.
Night.
Bye. Good night.
Good night.